What does quality of life mean to you? In a rapidly changing world, how we define and design what constitutes a dignified quality of life is being reimagined in our cities and communities.
Distinguished delegates, colleagues, partners, and friends from all corners of the world, I want on behalf of UN Habitat and the Quality of Life Program Center from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to welcome you to this side event on advancing human settlement statistics through the Quality of Life Index. Good morning and good night. This is part of the 56th session of the United Nations Statistical Commission. At a time when cities are facing accelerated pressure from climate change, inequality, rapid urbanization or lack of urbanization, digital transformation, one fundamental question confronts us. Are we measuring what truly matters for people's life? For decades, economic growth indicators have guided national and local decision-making. Yet, increasingly, member states, the international community, are calling for approaches that move beyond GDP, approaches that capture well-being, inclusion, resilience, and life experience. The Quality of Life Index represents an important step in this evolution. This is not simply a new metric. It is an effort to reframe how we understand urban progress. We are integrating objective and subjective data, aligning global standards with local realities, and strengthening the capacity of cities and national statistics systems to generate actionable insights. Today's discussion in this side event is therefore not only methodological, it is institutional, it is political, and it is transformative. In this side event, we will explore three critical dimensions. Number one, how human settlement statistics have evolved in the UN system and how they complement today the global urban monitoring framework. The second one is how quality of life metrics align well-being and with beyond GDP initiatives and can inform policy at national and city levels. And the third one, a very important one, how we move from measurement to implementation, from data to governance, from pilots to institutionalization. Our distinguished panel brings together perspectives from global statistic governance, from regional commission, from city leaderships, from operational platforms supporting the Quality of Life Index. All these experiences will help us examine not only the value proposition of the index, but also the pathways towards endorsement, adoption, and scaling. As we began, I would like to invite to reflect on a central premise. Statistics are not neutral. They shape priorities. They influence budgets. They define what societies value. If we refine what we measure, we reshape what we build. This side event is conformed in terms of the dynamic of the event of two initial speakers. And I'm very proud to introduce to you Mr. Robert Undua, Chief of Data and Analytics from UN Habitat, and Mr. Richard Hayes, Co-Chair on Wellbeing Measurement of the Working Group. It is my pleasure to open this session and invite our first speaker, who is going to guide us through the evolution of human settlement statistics within the UN national system. Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. Good morning to you all, our distinguished delegates, partners, but also colleagues. From UN Habitat, where I'm connecting from here in Nairobi, let me start, of course, by noting that we do recognize that urbanization is one of the defining transformations of our century, but also for many other generations to come. And of course, today we do notice that cities generate more than 80% of global GDP, but they're also home to over half of our humanity. Yet, behind all this growth lies a very stark reality. As we see very often from our data and statistics, we have nearly 2.8 billion people today who live in inadequate housing. And of course, that includes over 1.1 billion people who live in slums and informal settlements. And I think many of such paradoxes do raise a number of fundamental questions, as noted by Eduardo. Sometimes we wonder whether we are measuring urban success in ways that truly reflects people's lived experiences. And of course, for many decades here at UN Habitat, we've been collecting and working with many partners on human settlement statistics. And often, of course, we've focused primarily on tracking indicators around the urban population sizes, the expansions, sometimes around just housing counts and the infrastructure coverage. And of course, such metrics remain very necessary even today, but they are no longer sufficient for helping us to understand the complexity of a lot of our modern urban systems. And so from the side of UN Habitat, we've been looking at some transitions that should help us reshape the field of urban monitoring. First, we are very much, of course, emphasizing the aspect of moving from sectoral measurements to systems thinking. The idea here is very much, for example, if you look through the lens of housing, housing cannot be understood in isolation from aspects such as transport or land use, shapes in terms of productivity, or even the environmental quality that we do have today directly affects our health and well-being. Therefore, cities, of course, today are functioning as interconnected ecosystems, and they can, of course, facilitate the aspect of measuring different frameworks, but many of these might not necessarily reflect the reality and the lived experiences of our citizens. So we need to somehow integrate a sectoral measurement that can help us understand better what is happening in our urban systems. Secondly, we of course also transitioning very much from understanding not just national averages in our data, but also the spatial precisions of this data. Here, of course, the idea is to make sure that we bring in technologies and geospatial measurements that can allow us to identify who is being left behind and perhaps identify very well some inequalities within cities. And of course, a lot of those inequalities tend to hide under national statistics where we don't have the disaggregations coming in at the right levels. And of course, that also makes it very difficult for us to target, particularly where we are focusing on a place-based policy sort of a response approach. Thirdly, of course, we are also very cognizant of the fact that we need to be shifting very much from just tracking outputs to outcomes of our urban citizens. The idea here, of course, is that a presence of infrastructure alone does not automatically translate into improved well-being. The real test is perhaps whether people experience safer neighborhoods, whether they have, for example, shorter commutes, or they are experiencing and having affordable housing, and suddenly, of course, if they are living healthier lives and living in healthier environments. So from the side of UN Habitat, collectively, all these aspects come down into aspects of the SDG 11 specifically, but also the New Urban Agenda. And of course, these are very historical frameworks that brought big steps forward in terms of placing cities at the center of the global development agenda. Yet, what we see in a lot of our SDG and New Urban Agenda monitoring frameworks is that this data alone is not fully capturing the multidimensional nature of our urban life. This is why UN Habitat, collectively with many partners, we worked on advancing the global urban monitoring framework. This framework, of course, is very easy and simple to apply, but it's meant, for example, to translate a lot of these global commitments from the SDGs, the New Urban Agenda, into actionable local evidence that cities and local governments can work with to influence local decisions, but also financing mechanisms. It, of course, integrates a lot of the SDG components, but it's also more so very complementary in terms of helping us to understand economic performances, social inclusion, environmental sustainability, the aspects of governance, and most importantly, it also helps us as a decision-making tool to influence some element of coherent urban intelligence. Obviously, and alongside the global urban monitoring framework today, we now have the Quality of Life initiative, which we'll hear more about in the conversation today. But this framework, of course, or the Quality of Life initiative represents, in our view, the next evolution in terms of human settlement statistics, in terms of understanding, in terms of tracking what is being achieved in terms of urban progress. Because we believe ultimately that urban and economic growth alone are not the destination that we are aiming for. We are aiming for human transformations and the transformation of the lives of people who live in our cities. So today, when we look at the value and the aspects of the Quality of Life initiative, the metrics that it offers is already helping us to understand or move away from just tracking infrastructure to understanding the human experience, or moving away from just tracking expansion, but also to understanding the livability experiences, and of course, moving away from just tracking growth, but also being able to understand the elements of dignity within the citizens that live in our cities. This whole angle and aspect, of course, aligns very strongly with a lot of the other global processes that we're seeing today. As we'll hear the aspects perhaps from Richard, it connects very well from the Beyond GDP measurement frameworks, but it also connects very well with the idea of enhancing and tracking the relevancy of what is it that we value within our cities, and what do citizens and our people in cities do value. And of course, for the decision makers, they want to know exactly whether their investments are translating into better lived experiences. So looking ahead, there are three perhaps essential priorities that deserve our collective action. One, we want to see how we can deepen the integration of the experiences that we've developed from the Quality of Life initiative into translating those into systems and institutionalized mechanisms. And of course, that calls for integrating both the geospatial, other administrative data, but also other statistical data sets to help us understand better these urban realities. Secondly, we of course also want to flag up the idea of the need to invest in national level capacities, particularly in regions that are urbanizing very fast, to make sure that some of these approaches are fully institutionalized and the benefits that come from them can be shared out with everyone collectively. And I think last but not least is to ensure that all this data that we do collect not only informs decisions, but at the same time translates into local action. In conclusion, of course, I would add that if the last century very much focused on measuring economic growth, this century must now focus on measuring whether people are truly thriving in the places they've chosen to live in. And our human settlement statistics, therefore, is no longer just a data point or on the peripheral. These are statistics that need to be able to work coherently as foundation mechanisms for SDGs, but also as foundation mechanisms for local level decision making. So through the Global Urban Monitoring Framework and the complementary quality of life initiative, we are very much committed and would want to work with a lot of you, taking this opportunity, of course, to ensure that we can advance more integrated, but also people-centered understanding of what we are achieving in these urban realities. So for UN Habitat, we stand ready to work with all of you, specifically the National Statistical Offices, many city leaders, and development partners to advance this shared measurement or in terms of our future. And I think last but not least is to note that the aspect of the Quality of Life Initiative will also be discussed at this year's UN Statistical Commission. And therefore, we look forward to receiving a lot of feedback from our national statistical systems and many partners, and obviously the support for ensuring this is coherently integrated into the human settlement statistics. Thank you, and back to you, Eduardo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for keeping exactly the time, Robert. And you are correct. Beyond being a measurement framework, the Quality of Life Index is expected to be advanced as a core statistical governance tool, embedded with national statistic systems, but also strongly connected to the expression of our local needs. As well, it's important to recognize that we move from this notional sectoral measurement to system thinking. This means that we need to integrate quality of life into planning, into budgeting, into public expenditure framework. We need to align, as you also correctly mentioned, to well-being measurements to beyond GDP, and we hope and we encourage everyone to assist us in the process of endorsement this pathway in the 57th session of the Statistical Commission. We hope that quality of life indicator innovation will be institutionalized in the decision architecture of global metrics. I'm delighted to present our second speaker, Mr. Richard Hayes, who is the co-chair on well-being measurement. The floor is yours, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. It is a huge pleasure to be with you today. Can I just check, Eduardo, you can see my slides?
I can perfectly, yes.
Fabulous. Thank you. So my name is Richard Hayes. I'm from the UK Office for National Statistics, and I'm co-chair of the UN's expert group on wellbeing measurement with Mr. Mohammed Hassan from the UAE. I'm going to take you through just a couple of slides really to reinforce many of the topics that Robert's already introduced, and it's always a joy to follow Robert, and I very much agree with the things he's just outlined for you. But just to explain who the Expert Group for Wellbeing Measurement is, from 2022 onwards, the UN Network of Economic Statisticians, which is a country-led group which brings together experts to work on frontier issues in and around the topics of economic statistics and the areas it is related to, ran a series of online sprints that allowed us to draw together materials on the topic of what is beyond GDP and how countries were measuring and delivering beyond GDP, which we fed into a report to the 2024 United Nations Statistical Commission. Was basically a recommendation that said that the level of maturity that this topic had reached was at a stage that an expert group for wellbeing measurement could be constructively created to lead on bringing together some key deliverables. And amongst those, I particularly highlighted the word synthesize a consensus on the contents of a statistical framework. The key lessons from the sprints that we undertook, which brought together an extremely large number of presentations from countries, international organizations, academics, and other experts, was that there had been no lack of international work on this topic. There was a huge number of variables and alternative presentations which had been developed and which were being utilized around the world. But what we really lacked was a forum in which to begin to look at this landscape and select those which gave the most benefits and to understand in which circumstances they could be most constructively used by policymakers. And our objective with the expert group for wellbeing measurement is to begin that process of synthesizing the information that is out there, identifying data gaps, identifying how we move forward, and reach a position where countries are able to develop and produce data which will allow them to compare and contrast both within and between countries. Within that, we're very, very keen to ensure that we lean into the development of the System of National Accounts, which has just completed its revision for 2025, the System for Environmental Economic Accounting, which is currently going through an update process, and working with our social statistician colleagues on the System of Population and Social Statistics, which is under development in their area. Now, our aim is to therefore draw together a guidance technical document that is currently working under the title The Framework for Inclusive and Sustainable Wellbeing, which draws on data which is produced from within these three systems. We want to minimize new burdens wherever possible on data collection bodies and national statistics institutes, recognizing the very real constraints that many countries find themselves under. But what we can deliver is additional data guidance and support in terms of how to present and use that data and how to put it together with other information which is available. And the process of creating that document is currently ongoing. We have task teams working through this year on key chapters in this. We expect this will not be a one-stage process. There will have to be continued iteration of this, and I'm going to explain a bit more about why that is in a second. But our aim is to work with the best experts and as wide a range of stakeholders as possible. So anyone who is interested in getting involved, do please let me know, and I can provide contact details that we can distribute. One of the key things which is happening at the moment is Robert mentioned that this is a point in time where there is great interest in this, and this is completely correct. And within the system at the moment, I think I can observe operation at three distinct levels. So the UN Secretary General has established a high-level expert group on the topic of beyond GDP. I'm going to say a bit more about them in a moment. National statistics institutes have been invited alongside international organisations and other experts to participate in the expert group on wellbeing measurement that I've just been describing. And we obviously see the work that UN Habitat is leading on the quality of life initiative. Now, one of the things that I think is clear to all of us is that one person's beyond GDP can very easily be another person's well-being, can easily be described as quality of life by another. And so one of the things we do need to do, and that the expert group on wellbeing measurement is attempting to deliver, is a glossary of terms where we agree what these sorts of labels mean and where they're the same, and importantly, where they may differ, so that we can actually take the whole of this agenda forward, working across and between these groups to ensure that we are giving a consistent message and consistent feedback to those statistical institutes which we're asking to provide data in consistent frames. The high-level expert group on Beyond GDP that I just mentioned was established by the Secretary General earlier this year in reaction to actions that are rising out of the Pact for the Future in 2024. We've seen an interim report from them, which was published in November. You can find their materials on the UN website. And I've briefly captured what was contained in their interim report in terms of the areas that they view a high-level dashboard should address, and some proposals for additional metrics which they have in development. We expect to see their final report in the spring of this year, and very much we're hoping to see that and to work closely with them and their team to ensure that there is alignment between the work of these different groups that I've just outlined. Importantly, their high-level dashboard, they've characterized as looking to have somewhere in the region of about 20 metrics. And as we all know, in terms of developing and delivering policy, 20 outcome metrics are exceedingly useful into focusing the question on what we should be delivering, but don't necessarily answer the question of how, in terms of how policy should be designed or how it should be implemented. Simply taking the topic of education here, you can have measures around preschool access, schooling rates, literacy, higher education uptake, as well as a range of social aspects. Now, depending on what aspect of education a country is particularly focused on developing, they will need different data to be able to help them to support the delivery of outcomes against these common areas. And this, I think, is where we take the view that there is an opportunity for us to bring these strands of work together. The high-level expert groups aim to create a 20 measure dashboard, which will give us high-level outcomes which we would expect all countries of the world to be interested in pursuing, establishes a set of guiding stars, but doesn't necessarily give a broad statistical framework which allows you to bring together multiple indicators to support policy development to deliver against those outcomes. And so we view that the framework for inclusive and sustainable well-being, and my apologies, I should have spelled that out on this slide for you, which is the document that we are looking to deliver from the expert group on wellbeing measurement, is our opportunity to outline a clear framework that explains how stocks and flows of various aspects relate to these outcomes, how we think about distributions and inequities amongst the distribution of those outcomes, and provides us with a framework which allows us to build the capacity to support individual countries augment the 20 common measures with supplementary measures that they may wish to observe and which they feel are of more direct relevance in their national context, to take them on that journey to be able to not just focus on those 20 high-level measures, which the high-level expert group is going to recommend as we understand it, but also to bring that into a framework which really works for them at the national level. When I look at the Quality of Life initiative, I'm really excited. I think this is a great development because it gives us a couple of advantages that I think other areas in terms of statistical development of these types of manuals and guidance that we're working on do not necessarily have. And the first of those is we have a really strong and rich environment with established infrastructure which allows us to pilot and to test and to explore metrics which may prove to be incredibly valuable at the local level and potentially at the national level, which the framework for inclusive sustainable well-being can learn from and draw into its description of the statistical framework that we wish to see to operate in underneath the 20 measure dashboard. As the Quality of Life initiative takes its work forward and develops its program, the opportunity to therefore learn from that and also to bring to you the measures and other data that we are working on and capturing at the national level to consider what relevance it has at the local is a huge opportunity for us to work as a single combined community to tackle these topics in a way which allows us to incrementally improve the guidance and to learn from different countries and different areas' experiences. This opportunity, I think, is for me one of the real opportunities that this point in time brings us, that not only do we have interest at the very highest political levels, but we also have the statistical framework aligning underneath that and a strong and deep environment in which we can learn quickly, we can test together, we can explore together, and ultimately we can ensure that guidance is not developed once every 15 years and then goes through a lengthy process of revision, but actually in this first formative stage, we can do a lot of that learning at pace and with quite an agile model between the Quality of Life initiative and our work on the expert group for wellbeing measurement as we observe and learn and work with you and what you're doing. I will pause there and pass back to Eduardo, but it's a delight to be here and I hope today is a great success. Thank you.
On the contrary, thanks to you, Richard, for this very rich, very schematic and clear presentation. And it's very clear to us that this important challenge of bringing these strands together is what we need to do. We are going to move into a next segment of our discussion, which is a panel discussion. And for that, we will, of course, build on the strong conceptual and methodological foundation that both Robert and Richard created. We heard about human settlement statistics. We heard about the need of alignment. Now we are going to explore how these ideas translate into governance, into implementation, institutional uptake across regions and cities. And I'm delighted to introduce to you our really incredible panel. Let me start by Mrs. Noura Al-Yusuf. She's the coordinator of the Quality of Life Program Center in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. She will share the strategic vision and methodological foundations behind the development of the Quality of Life Index. We have Grayson Bass representing the Quality of Life Project, who would speak to the knowledge platform about the knowledge platform, the digital tools, the innovation mechanisms supporting the implementation process. We have Mr. Zakaria Ulad, who is the Vice President for Urban Planning and the Smart City Commission of the City of Agadir, and he will bring the perspective of a rapidly evolving city translating the index into local priorities. We have a representative of a very important city, the City of Manchester, Mr. David Holliston, Head of City Policy for the city, who will offer insights from the perspective of integrating quality of life metrics into policy, into governance systems. We have Mr. Rolando Campo, the Director of the Statistical Division at ECLAC in Latin America in Santiago, who is going to provide the critical regional and member state perspective on statistical governance and endorsement. And we will have Mrs. Sukaina Al-Nasrawi, who is the lead of the Sustainable Urban Development Portfolio at ESQA Regional Commission, who will speak to regional collaboration, about regional collaboration, capacity building, SDG localization in the Arab region. I would ask all these distinguished panels to keep the response to 2-3 minutes, to have a real deep discussion, assure balance, inclusivity, and dynamism in our exchange. I'm going to start the first question, and we don't have in this, we have a second round. We will start with the last person that is speaking in this first round. This is about the foundation and the value proposition of the Quality of Life Index. And I would like to ask to Ms. Noura Al-Yusuf, from the perspective of the Quality of Life Initiative, what has been the rationale for developing a global quality of life index, and how does this methodological framework integrate objective, subjective data, as well as global and local indicators to support city-level decision-making? Ms. Noura, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with many of you friends and, of course, colleagues and participants from around the world. It's a very loaded question, and it's very hard to kind of summarize, let's just say, 5 years of work into 2 minutes, but I will do my best. The prioritization of quality of life really was a byproduct of need, right? So, to commit resources and time and effort to working on something really stems from there being a problem that needed to be solved, or a demand or a need to focus and prioritize on something, on a specific area. So quality of life as a concept, let's just say, for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, even within Vision 2030, was very much a focus area. It was an area that required elevating, prioritizing, creating the necessary conditions and options to realize a better quality of life for citizens and residents in the kingdom. Now, as we embarked on that, we also realized very quickly that there was no real framework out there, or international benchmark or international index, that really served our needs to be able to measure things and monitor progress in a holistic way. Now, we also then quickly realized that this didn't just apply to us in a vacuum, right? Cities and governments around the world also were faced with some of the same challenges that we were faced with. And that's really the impetus or the start of the work on the Quality of Life Initiative. As we had those conversations with governments around the world, we also realized that traditional indicators tell us how economies perform, and that's a positive. At least we have that in place. but they rarely explain how people experience daily life. I think we can all agree on this call that quality of life for me may mean something different than for Eduardo or for Grayson or for the 60+ people that are on this call. So it's also a very sensitive and delicate matter to make sure that it's inclusive, that we're taking the various segments of society into consideration. And sometimes economic indicators don't uncover what we really need to uncover in order to improve quality of life for residents. So really the index is a byproduct of the overall initiative, right? The overall initiative is about how do we prioritize quality of life in our global agendas? How do we make sure that we are prioritizing the key things that's going to elevate life for people around the world? The index is designed to be a tool for us to, close the gap in the measurement needs, right? So how can we monitor progress? How do we make sure we're on the right track? How can we ensure that citizens, including everyone on this call, are experiencing a good quality of life in our chosen cities? So we really set out to solve really kind of 3 key problems here, right? One was one size does not fit all. So although global indices today need to have consistency, need to have comparability, need to have standards in place, one size definitely doesn't fit all though, right? So we needed to solve for that problem. So how do we do that? The index is a really innovative tool in the sense that we created 2 layers to it. A global layer and a global layer and a local layer, excuse me. A global layer being defined by 28 indicators that were agreed to through consensus and global consultation as core, universal, regardless of where you are in the world, you need these core things to have a good quality of life. But then we created a mirror layer that said for different cities around the world with different local contexts, they could define indicators or priority areas that they needed to focus on within the context of where they are. And so this has never been done before. And we're seeing very, very good feedback and kind of uptake on this concept. Now, this leads to the next point, right? Many global indices really focus on ranking, top 5, big 3, you name it, right? From the outset, we said, the whole point of this exercise is not to create another rank. The whole point of this exercise was really to support decision-making process. The cities should not be competing against each other. The city should be competing with itself. How does the city of Agadir improve within the local context of the city of Agadir? Agadir should not have aspirations to be Paris or to be Tokyo, right? So we really wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of a paradigm shift, something that focuses on insights, on how to inform decision-making, how to help leaders prioritize, where do they invest, how do they design programs, how do they allocate resources, all with the main objective of how to improve daily life. So this applies very much to Saudi cities and how we are looking at things within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I don't want to go over my time, so I just wanted to say, really in conclusion, the index reflects a shift, and the shift is about how are we defining progress? How are we measuring outcomes instead of focusing on just measuring, either inputs or outputs? And how do we take into consideration also how people experience their city? You did ask me to mention on the subjectivity and the objectivity aspect of this. Again, really taking a holistic approach. You can measure things from different perspectives, from an objective outset and from a subjective outset. A city might think they're doing extremely well in a certain aspect of quality of life, but the perception by citizens could be less than how they see their performance. And the reverse is also true. And we've experienced that firsthand here. What's important is not that it's one way or the other. What's important is that there's transparency and that you can see that this is the case, which then allows a city to prioritize and know what action to take. Really, the aspiration for this new index and this new tool is really to be a helpful tool, not a burden, but something that cities from around the world can extrapolate value that can then help them be more organized, more efficient, and improving quality of life for their citizens around the world. So that's really the kind of summary of the index in itself at a high level. Back to you, Eduardo.
Thank you very much, Nura. You were really correct. This question was all-encompassing, difficult, but you have an incredible synthesis capacity, creativity to put it all this into 3-4 minutes. In addition to what Nura mentioned, the index is supported by a knowledge ecosystem, but very important forms of innovation, new pathways of development and integrating platform technologies. And we have a great expert in this area, and this is Grayson Bass. I would like to ask him how the quality of life platform that was designed in these 3 years support member states and local governments in adapting and operationalizing the quality of life index, particularly as you did, and I would say very successfully, through digital tools, data analytics, geospatial technologies, and emerging capabilities associated to AI and foresight. Mr. Grayson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eduardo. I'd like to echo what my colleagues have said previously, that this is such an important project because it allows us to reframe how we understand development. And I think that some of the things that you've heard are accurate. The quality of life, it varies individual to individual. I mean, think about what that looks like, community to community, country to country. And where we started was kind of addressing 2 challenges. One was the traditional, survey method is kind of a 2-year process. And I think, you heard colleagues speak earlier about how, what that data says ends up shaping policy, what ends up shaping what communities decide to do. And if that process is delayed by 2 years, which is fairly common, it takes a few months to get survey data, you do sense making, maybe if you do it at the wrong time, you've missed a budget cycle, so now it's into the next year, and all of a sudden you're addressing a problem that may not exist anymore or that has metastasized. This is not useful for community development. And, our approach to answer that was, how can we shorten that cycle? And 2, how do we make cities data rich? How do we make them knowledge rich? Because there was a study about 1.5 years ago that said governments are really good at doing the wrong thing, not because they intend to, but because of this type of delay or lack of information. So our approach was to take these tools, both around how do we use spatial intelligence, how do we bring in artificial intelligence, how do we bring in some of these human aspects and kind of gamification to play so that we can get more timely data. And I think that that's an ongoing challenge, but the result is that, we have the ability and have kind of discovered new ways to actually, particularly around subjective data, to understand perception of quality of life. And I guess that's one of the things that myself and my team have kind of taken away from the initiative, is that, this subjective data is really important to highlight and to actually frame and to help cities tell that story, because a government can be doing all the right things, but the delay in how the community perceives it can be problematic at best. And in a democratic paradigm where city leaders are elected every few years, that's the difference between winning an election and losing one. And I think that is really where the strength and the innovativeness of the platform comes along, which is, if we can give governments better tools, not only to collect this data and to act on them sooner, but also to then communicate that with their community, that is a fundamental shift in how we do development, how we co-create cities with residents, and how we address the need to be more resilient and more responsive in this day and age. Over to you, Eduardo.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. You said a very important word that I would like to use to introduce the next panelists. You said we want to make cities data rich and to use this data for policies. And I would like to move to our next panelist, Mr. David Holliston from the city of Manchester. Mr. David, from a city perspective, from your city, how was the adoption of the Quality of Life Index in terms of supported data, in terms of production and analysis? And how do you feel this can help you and you as local authority to better understand challenges and opportunities for urban development and policy prioritization? Mr. David.
Thank you, Eduardo, and great to be here today on the call. I think our experiences of this, obviously we're a fairly new member, recently joined, and we came into the project as a data-rich local authority. We already have a lot of local, city, region and national level data. So what we found is that the applied nature of the quality of life work has really made us think about the data we do collect and start to make some judgments about what the most useful single measures are across different domains. So for education, for example, we have 100% of our students who finish school, but we've been thinking about what that means in terms of attainment and what are the best measures at 16. And then we've been able to interpret that and create a measure for us that works, which is kind of 4 qualifications that is basically finishing school, because it means finishing school with qualifications. So it's really made us think about the data that we hold, and a lot of it we hold it for good reason, because we need to hold it for lots of different agencies. The other thing for us is that we really like the fact that the Quality of Life initiative is about qualitative as well as quantitative measures, and that really aligns with where we are in our work at the moment and how we want to use data through citizen research projects that we're doing with the University of Manchester, and things like our resident surveys. We have a really good resident survey at a city region level that we've had to do some work on to extract that data at a local authority level, and also some translation of those measures to understand how they might be used as proxies if they don't match up perfectly with how we want to use them. So it's been really interesting to balance that quantitative and qualitative measure to try and get to a quality of life index. Some things that are measured we don't actually have local data on, so intentional homicide rate would be an example, or things like housing affordability is quite nuanced in Manchester. There are different spatial elements of the city centre is obviously much more expensive than other areas of the city. So we've had to understand the data, and that helps us to apply it in the index. The key thing for us, I think, is as we use the index going forward with senior managers and politicians to make decisions, there needs to be a real rationale behind the figures that we use. So we need to be able to use them, standardize them across other members of the Quality of Life Index, but also explain how they're recognizable in a city, in a Manchester context. So I think that's been really important for us. And one of the ways that we've tried to do that is to have a workshop, which we held last year, about the local indicators aspect of the Quality of Life Initiative, because that really helps us to address those things that are most important at a city level, as well as having the read across other cities across the globe. So at the moment, the indicators are really helping us to both reflect some existing policy initiatives, so work on the Good Employment Charter, our campaign for the real living wage, and things like the Good Landlord Charter, as well as helping to identify some new policy areas that are coming out of the index, and I think will come out of the next stage as well. So it's been a really useful process so far to think as almost a narrowing down of some of the data that we do hold, and really interrogating that a little bit more through this lens.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you also for this concise response. Robert said we need to deepen quality of life experiences at local level, and Nura mentioned the need to understand that each place has his own expression of what quality of life is. And in that sense, I would like to ask our next panelist, Mr. Zakaria Ulat from the city of Agadir. In your experience when approaching the adoption of the Quality of Life Index, how do you strengthen local data capacity? How you use it to inform urban priorities and support inclusive development? What lessons can you transmit of your experience to other cities, other partners that are listening to us on a city that is facing some forms of resource constraints and also rapid urban change? Mr. Zakaria, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Eduardo. It's very good to be with you and all these familiar and friendly faces from the Quality of Life Initiative and UN Habitat. So from our perspective, from Agadir's perspective, adopting the Quality of Life Index, and I'm sorry, I'm going to shake my hand just so that the sensor can turn back the light on. Adopting the Quality of Life Index was not primarily a technical exercise. It was really a governance choice. And it was really key for us to see it from this perspective. And as you might know, and might have seen also from the last African Football Cup that was organized in Morocco and also in Agadir, which was dramatic in every sense of the word, I think. Agadir is an African, Amazigh, Arab, mid-sized city undergoing indeed, like you said, a very rapid transformation with strong demographic growth, climate stress, from heat waves to flooding and so on. So with all of these aspects of this setting, the Quality of Life Initiative helped us to move from fragmented sectoral data, which was the way we used to work, towards a shared urban language for decision making. And I think this highlights one of the most important aspects of the Quality of Life Initiative, which is the process. It's not only about measuring and getting figures for how the quality of life is like in our city. It's really about the whole process that involves different stakeholders and make sure that for people that used to work together for years and that spend very little time together around the table, you bring them all together. So rather than treating the Quality of Life Index as a ranking tool, and I think Nora underlined this a lot, we use it really as a structuring framework. So it doesn't really matter how we rank, how do we compare to other cities. What's really important is to align data coming from different municipal departments within our city and to shift the internal conversations from what do we deliver, which is very technical, very performance-oriented, to where and for whom value is created. So people and neighborhoods and spatial management. This was particularly important for housing and human settlement issues, of course, where averages often hid deep spatial disparities, which is very common in global South cities. The index strengthened local data capacity, to answer directly your question, from three concrete ways, if I have to keep only three. The first one is it pushed us to standardize indicators across services, so we all measure the same thing the same way, and therefore we can talk to each other. The second one is that it encouraged institutional coordination, because no single department owns the quality of life. It is cross-sectoral, and this helped us create our decision theater, our urban data platform, in our first steps into platform urbanism. Again, Agadir is an emergent city. And then the third point is that it helped us legitimize the data use politically. So decisions were based on facts, and those facts were coming from a framework which is very much integrated and make sure that there is no blind spot. There's nothing left behind, and it underlines really the public value aspects and the social value aspects rather than just technical financial aspects, which are very common. And in terms of urban priorities, of course, the index helped us to reframe investment choices spatially, because now we cover the city and we see it from a with spatial lenses. So by making disparities visible in the tool between neighborhoods, it supported more targeted intervention in very specific neighborhoods. For instance, in Agadir, it would be the foothill neighborhoods in the northern part of the city. This governance-oriented use of the data, which is very new to us, was one of the reasons why Agadir was approached and has been recognized through the Shanghai Award with UN Habitat 2 years ago, and we are very proud of that. And we see it also as an award for the whole quality of life initiative and not only us. So for cities facing resource constraints, because that's also something that you talked about, and rapid change, I would highlight maybe 3 lessons that I can share with my fellow cities, mainly from the global south, but with the geopolitical situation that the world lives in, I think many cities in the global north also can benefit from this. So the first point is to start with governance, not technology. I think this is really key. Technology is easy and is available. Governance is much more complicated, and it is key to the success. So you don't need to like perfect data to begin. You have to begin somewhere and then improve as you go. You need shared indicators to create coordination and accountability. And that brings people around the table as well. The second lesson learned would be to treat indicators as decision tools, not reporting tools. And this is really key also. My colleagues talked about input and output. So indicators should not be an output, a reporting value. It should be really a decision that comes as an input. Their values lie, again, in how they shape priorities, how they make things visible or invisible. And the third and last lesson I would share would be to anchor measurements within public value. So this concept of public value, how do we serve the public? Which targets do we serve? And do we really benefit our citizens as a public value, or do we just focus on performance and optimization again, which is unfortunately the way many cities work out there, including ours, unfortunately, sometimes. And so to conclude, I would say that for cities of Agadir, and this is really me speaking from my heart because it's been a game changer for our city. Quality of life measurement is not about knowing more, because we already know a lot. It is really about governing better and making better decisions with fairness, with clarity, with shared responsibility, and attaining or achieving that public value that we are looking for all of our citizens. And yeah, I think this would be the final word. Thank you, Eduardo.
On the contrary, Zakaria, it's extremely interesting presentation. I would like to use 2-3 words that you mentioned. One is not only a technical exercise, but an institutional and governance exercise. And we need to standardize indicators, but through institutional coordination and understand the importance of governance and decision-making and public value. And all this requires, of course, cities to be taking their own responsibility, but also a strong connection to national governments in the institutional and in the policy and the governance mechanisms of this. And I would like to connect this to Mr. Rolando Campo from ECLAC and to ask him from the Regional Commission for Latin America, how do you see the regional, the statistical governance perspective of this? As Zakaria well mentioned, is not only indicators, but it's also governing better. What is the value proposition of the Quality of Life Initiative and the index for member states? Mr. Rolando.
Thank you, Eduardo, and happy to be here and good day to all of you. So, first of all, let me tell you that in ECLAC, we have, in the statistics division in ECLAC, we are aligned with this index and the quality of life, and we are working in this regard. But one of the issues that I have to highlight is that so we support countries to capacity building for the national statistical offices and the geospatial and the geographical offices to create and to produce indicators. So we give these tools with capacity building to the countries. And in addition, we coordinate our regional bodies, the Statistical Conference of the Americas and the UNGGIM Americas at the regional level. And in our division, we try to produce indicators to increase the production of indicators and to work and implementing platforms to disseminate these indicators. For example, one of the indicators that measures that we have produced using satellite images to produce statistical indicators in urban areas is the one that we are to increase the urban surface areas over 5 years intervals. We have been working with another initiative that is the Urban and Cities Platform for Latin America and the Caribbean, which supports the monitoring of the urban dimensions for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the new urban agenda. This platform provides urban information at national and subnational levels, including city level, to promote more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable urbanization in Latin America and the Caribbean. So these indicators, we try to incorporate it in our statistical and geographical platform, the CEPAL-STAT. And what we try to do in this regard is to work with countries, with the National Statistical Office to produce this kind of information and support with technical statistical procedure, like, for example, small area estimation, the disaggregation, the link with the geospatial information to download the information to city level, to national, to subnational level, and to incorporate all kind of indicators to give the opportunity to the countries, to the cities, to obtain this information to create this quality of life initiative. This is the way that we are trying to do from the regional level, work with national institutes, and then to disaggregate all the information to the city level.
Thank you, Mr. Rolando, for this explanation. Regional commissions are extremely important to support this capacity building exercise, standards, technical tools, etc. And we have a great ally of the Quality of Life Index and the initiative at the world level, but in the Arab region. And Sukaina Al-Nasrawi from ESCWA has been extremely supportive of all this process, from not only regional application and SDG localization, but something extremely important, which is the knowledge component, the guidelines, knowledge component of this. And I would like to ask to our friend Sukaina if she can elaborate on how the Regional Commission is trying to use the index for regional collaboration, statistical capacity building, for uptake of the index, better contextualization, and policy integration into national and local levels in the countries of the Arab region. Sukaina, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eduardo. And it's a pleasure and honor to take part in this rich panel discussion, see the faces of your minds. And also, I'd like to thank all the participants for their interest and engagement with us. So from ESCWA's perspective, the Quality of Life Initiative and its index, we look at it as most impactful when it operates as a bridge, we say, between the global commitments and the local decisions. And of course, regional collaboration is fundamental to making that bridge between the global and local work. So, and to answer your question on the how, of course, there are so many ideas and points to mention, but maybe I'll limit it to 3 points. I'll start with regional collaboration enabling contextualization with credibility. Okay, so contextualization with credibility. Through our work on FDG's localization and sustainable urban development across the Arab region, we see that cities really face shared challenges, going from, you name it, housing pressures, access to services, access to finance, inequality, resilience, and many others, yet within very different institutional and data contexts. So a regional approach allows the quality of life framework to respond to these realities while maintaining international comparability and a clear connection to the global layer of the index that Nora also mentioned at the start. So second, I would say the regional collaboration, this is of course focusing on the how, strengthens statistical readiness across levels of governance. So aligning those national statistical systems with the institute data needs is essential if quality of life indicators are to inform planning and investment decisions rather than remain, parallel reporting by society. So regional platforms really play a critical role, I would say, in creating this alignment and supporting our practical application. And third, which is really of utmost importance, regional collaboration really brings policy legitimacy through peer learning. And when cities and countries, and we've seen that through the implementation of the initiative for the last couple of years, when cities and countries exchange implementation experiences, the index really gains ownership and political relevance and momentum for institutional adoption, right? So this peer learning based approach, I would say, accelerates the institutional adoption. And as Nora rightly said, it is not about ranking. It is about how to help the leaders prioritize and improve their contextual daily life. And as Zakaria also said, it is about the process and the learning it involves. So importantly, I'm not going to take my time. Importantly, I would say this regional work and this regional collaboration is deliberately also connected to a broader interregional dialogue across the UN system, ensuring that local and regional experiences actively, let's say, inform emerging global approaches to quality of life initiatives. And in short, regional collaboration ensures that the quality of life initiative and its index in specific is not treated as an additional metric. So it's not about indicators, as we were just saying, but as a shared policy framework that supports people-centered urban development of the people. I'll stop here and over here. Let's see.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sukaina. We are going to move to round 2, and here we shift to policy and to global alignment. The index is a measurement framework, but we would like to discuss in this second round, and some of you alluded all this, to the governance system, to the institutional life initiative is not only methodological rigor, but also institutional uptake and system-wide integration. I would like to invite the panelists, first of all, to reduce the time of the responses because we are running a bit behind, and to think in terms of 3 critical dimensions. First, how this can be scaled in the regional commission, in the national statistic offices, even in the city networks. How can they support broader adoption? Ultimate endorsement index. Second, the governance. What institutional arrangements are necessary to maintain comparability, credibility, long-term relevance, while keeping contextual adaptation? And the third, operational integration. How these platforms that Grace present, the tools, the capacity building that some of you alluded in terms of ecosystem, ensure this transition from measurement to policy. It is not one by one, it's a systemic transformation. So I would like to start now with Sukaina. And Sukaina, we were told that you need to become closer to the micro. I read in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Because some of them were not hearing you. Please,
Do you hear me
Sukaina,
better
tell
now?
us how ESQA, yes, how ESQA has been actively supporting the initiative, particularly through capacity building and some practical tools and knowledge framework of the quality of life initiative. About this?
Do you hear me clearly?
Please.
Yes, his line is breaking up, but you can go ahead and answer.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Eduardo. I'll try to get closer to the mic. Not sure what's happening technically, but in short, ESQA's approach to supporting quality of life initiative is really grounded, I would say, in a clear objective, which is ensuring that measurement leads to policy change. What we want is basically to enhance quality of life, right? So as was a regional convener, we bring together member states and all national statistical systems and regional also and global partners to translate those global frameworks into actionable regional, national, and even local pathways of evidences. So at the regional level, ASCOP really provides practical policy-oriented guidance that embed, I would say, quality of life considerations into planning and monitoring and even financing decisions, particularly through the SDG localization and the urban policy framework. And this is operationalized completely by creating a mutually reinforcing relationship, I would say, between the quality of life measurement process and the voluntary local reviews, for example. We also ensure that aspects of quality of life are also considered in supporting cities in building urban resilience and their digital urban transformation processes, making it part of a coherent governance architecture. And Zakaria started saying it's not about technology, it's about the governance itself. So rather than a standalone metric. At the same time, we place a very strong emphasis on capacity building around the concept of quality of life itself. So, for example, through regional initiatives like the Learning Journey of the Arab Learners Academy, which is a regional initiative of UN Habitat and ESCO, we're strengthening the capacities of city leaders in the region to integrate quality of life into sustainable urban development plans, strategies, and others. In parallel, through ESCO Learn platform, we deliver e-learning, for example, courses and targeted training programs that support policy makers in understanding quality of life, again, not only as a measurement framework, but as as a governing principle, I would say, for decision making and achieving sustainable development. And building, and I'll end with this, building on strong regional foundation. ESCO's role is not limited to the Arab region, rather, together with UN Habitat and the Quality of Life Program in Saudi Arabia, we are leading an inter-regional engagement with all UN regional commissions on quality of life in cities, aiming to achieve a unified inter-regional perspective to be launched hopefully at the World Urban Forum in May 2026. And this effort really aligns core concepts and statistical approaches across regions while allowing for local adaptability, as we say. So, and this is, of course, an essential condition for endorsement, scalability, and long-term relevance within the UN system and across. So, in closing, and to not take more time from esteemed colleagues on this in this panel, I would say ESCO is leveraging its convening role, regional guidance, capacity building, and inter-regional alignment to anchor quality of life at the center of governance, advancing, of course, people-centered development beyond. And I'll stop here. Over to you, Roy.
Thank you, Sukaina, for this rich response. You mentioned keywords like alignment, the quality of life index.
We can hear you, Eduardo. Why don't you close your video so maybe we can hear you?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Sorry for that. Mr. Roland, from the Regional Commission perspective of Latin America, tell us how national statistic offices can support as we are seeking engagement and endorsement in the forthcoming session of the UN Statistical Commission related to all this in your region.
Thank you. So first of all, as I mentioned, so we have a regional body, the Statistical Conference of the Americas, and we usually make statements for as a regional body to at the Statistical Commission, and we can try to ask countries to write one statement supporting this process. But most important, what I would like to propose in this regard, so we are going to have our meeting, our yearly meeting of the Executive Committee of the Statistical Conference in the Americas in August, and we are trying to do it in presence in Santiago de Chile, but I don't know if we are going to have the funding for that. But if don't, so we are going to have it virtually. So I would like to propose a presentation from the quality of life for and try to align the efforts for the Latin American and the Caribbean countries, just to begin the process to incorporate in the national statistical offices. I think one of the issues that Olat mentioned that is very important in this issue is the link with the statistical information, the production of statistical and geographical information, and the governance, which is very important in this issue. If we align these two processes, so we can be able to produce, to incorporate all this statistical information with the municipalities in our countries. And the first step, I think, is to begin to think with the national statistical offices and how to download the information to the local level using statistical techniques, as I mentioned, using geospatial information that and trying to incorporate these indicators at the local level to produce this quality of life in the developing countries that where most of the Latin American that we are middle-income countries, but we have to try to incorporate these techniques to these all the countries. This is what I am planning. So we can do something at the global level, the Statistical Commission, but my proposal is to incorporate it now at the regional level with the Statistical Conference of the America, the Executive Committee meeting in August. Thank you.
Mr. Rolando, this is a very wise advice. Certainly, we will follow this recommendation. We will talk to our colleagues and see what we can do in ECLAC to advance these discussions about quality of life. Thank you very much for it. I would like to come back to our colleague, Rayson Bass, and to ask him from an operational perspective, how this quality of life digital platform supports the transition from measurement to action. In other words, we have good data, as you said, rich data, analytics, and foresight tools, but how they are embedded into public policy cycles. Remember, we are talking about governance, how we support budgetary process, long-term planning, national and local levels. Grayson, we would like to hear from you about that.
Thank you, Eduardo. I'm going to turn this question around a little bit, and I'm going to challenge all of our participants to approach their work in a different way. We have all these great digital tools. We have, arguably centuries of being able to do analysis and measurement of populations. I would say that the challenge that we have now is in responding more effectively and more rapidly. And I think that there is a well-formed, I should say, bias of having, this gold level data, making sure that statistical samples are correct and that we can actually, be confident in what the results are. And I would propose that that is completely ineffective at this moment in time, that we need a more, we need a yes and approach to being able to measure. And I think that that's, Richard had mentioned earlier, he showed that nice graphic of, quality of life kind of being an experimental platform. And that's what I would like to encourage all of our colleagues to do, to actually be able to look at more frequent measurement, more neighborhood-based measurement, ways that we can actually get, an 80-20 response to know what to do so that we can actually affect change in our communities. And I think that that approach just in and of itself really reshapes how we act and how we are going to manage the onslaught of change that's going to come over the next several years and decades. And I think that if we can make that shift, and I think that the Quality of Life Initiative is providing those tools and is willing to partner and help with communities and national statistic offices, that makes an incredible difference in how we can successfully build community and cities together. It allows us to speak to our residents and cities of cities more frequently. It allows us to be connected into more effective and efficient ways to understand what's happening. And ultimately, it allows us to act and govern better. So that's why I would like to just leave it today. And I would just like to thank everyone for joining. And I do hope you take me up on that challenge. You can always reach out to me if you have questions about that, or if you just want to yell at me because you think it's wrong. You can also direct that to Mariah. She is the program coordinator, but you can also do it to me as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. On the contrary, Grayson, a big challenge, but extremely important to bring measurements down to neighborhoods and to operate change at that level. I would like to come back to our first speaker, Mrs. Noura Al-Yusuf from the Quality of Life Initiative and the Program Center. Noura, as this initiative expands across cities and regions, what governance mechanisms and institutional arrangements do you see as more critical to ensure consistency, comparability, and long-term policy relevance of the index, as you mentioned also, at the same time, keeping local?
I think Eduardo paused a little bit there, but just so I can reposition the question. So the question was about, governance and what are the long term kind of vision for kind of governance implementation or government's, let's say, parameters to ensure the integrity of the index as we expand. I mean, you heard from other colleagues, governance, for me, we look at governance in layers, right? Governance is all around us. I have governance at home with my daughter. Don't laugh, but there's governance in all kind of aspects of life, and this initiative is no different, right? So there's layers of governance around the initiative to ensure that we have the right, let's say, controls in place to ensure its long-term sustainability. Now, I'm going to be maybe a little bit more balanced in my view than Grayson, but I like Grayson's view and his challenge. I'll take you up on it as well. As a statistic, I majored in statistics in university, so I think there's a spectrum, right? And I think the way the world works today is that everything operates on a spectrum, right, today. And that doesn't mean you need to be extreme on either end. And I think the more that we learn how to blend different things together, to balance different things together as we progress and as we move through, decade on decade and what the world needs, we will have a better outcome. The index is no different, right? There's a core, which we need to maintain its integrity, make sure it's statistically sound, make sure that, that continues and that the robustness of the statistical soundness of the core remains. But at the same time, it can be complemented with emerging techniques, the sandbox effect of trying to test new things and see how does that work. And what I really appreciate about Grayson and how the team has been working is it's about experimentation. Doesn't mean it has to lock us in it forever. Does it work? Great. Are cities extrapolating value? Let's continue. If there's no value, why continue, right? So, but you need to allow space for that innovation and that experimentation to happen. So you also need governance for that as well, right? It sounds kind of counterproductive, but you do need governance for innovation as well to a certain extent. So the initiative really brings those two pieces together. There's control around the core, make sure the core is statistically sound, make sure that we have very high standards, make sure that there is some comparability with the universally agreed to aspects, but then also allowing the space for innovation to thrive and having emerging approaches, right? And at some point, I believe that some of the emerging statistics or the methods that we're going to start to experiment with will graduate. Not all of them will graduate, but some of them will potentially graduate. And so this is a great way for being able to explore those emerging approaches and emerging statistics. So, I'm going to leave it with that. I don't think anyone wants to see the governance diagrams as to how we're governing if anyone's interested, we're happy to share them. They're all published and they're all online, but really that's how we think of it, right? And so the other thing that I'm just really proud of with this initiative is the fact that it is really a participatory process. So the governance is important, but also the participation in the governance is just as important. It's great that you have governance, but if you don't have participants in it, then it's meaningless. So I will conclude with that and say thank you.
On the contrary, thank you very much to you, Nura. I'm sorry I'm not connecting because it seems I'm not passing very well to your computers. Let me please ask another question as we are moving ahead to the city of Manchester, to David. David, if we look ahead, how can experiences from cities that are applying the Quality of Life Index, Manchester, can be scaled and transferred to other cities? The question to you is, what types of institutional support or policy alignment are needed to move into that direction?
Thanks, Eduardo. I think we're quite short on time, so I'll keep it brief. I think in the UK context, the timing is really good because there's lots of work on longitudinal research programs. Some of those are on health, and we're participating in some of those. Just building on your point, Grayson, there's a big focus on neighbourhoods and place in the UK at the moment. So the government has launched a Pride in Place programme. We have 4 of those, which bring funding for areas of about 13,000 people over 10 years. And community engagement, decision making is all part of that. So I think quality of life is really important at that place-based level. And there's also lots of work going on about things in Greater Manchester, which is the city region Manchester is within, on Live Well, which is about health, Work Well, so about the links between work and health. And I think these all bring in sort of dimensions of quality of life, so moving beyond standard measures. So I think the timing is really good for this. What I kind of hope that we will have in Manchester is almost a kind of proof of concept. We were attracted to the project, obviously by its substance, but also some of the other places and cities that were participating. So I think as the community grows, having more cities like Manchester that can say, this is how we've developed our dashboard, how we've used the measures, and how that is helping us to develop new approaches to measuring the impact of our policies, our strategies, our interventions, budget decisions, will help to share the learning more. And I think we have a real opportunity to share with decision makers at Greater Manchester level for us to use some of our networks. We're a member of the UK Core Cities Network of large cities. We're a member of Euro Cities, and I think we might have people on the call today from there. So for me, it's kind of sharing our learning. It's like an action learning project. We're learning on the job, but I think we have a real opportunity to have in this project both a set of global indicators, but also the ability to set local indicators that are meaningful. And I think that's a really powerful message for places and cities across the globe. So that's what we hope we will be able to do with our involvement in the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you, David. We are going to move to another session, which is some questions that we got from the chat, and I would like to ask the global coordinator of the Quality of Life Initiative, Mrs. Maraya Deving, to read these questions and to tell us who made them. I don't know if we will have time to respond at that, and otherwise I will request those that they feel the question when addressed to them to provide a written response or a less 1 minute response. Maraya.
Okay, thank you so much, Eduardo. So we have a first question from Christian Hammond from the Gauteng City Region Observatory in Johannesburg in South Africa. And the question is, in a situation where cities or regions have a lot of data related to quality of life, what is your advice for making the most impacts with the available data? And I would like to ask Robert to answer this question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Maraya. I think that's a very classic and straightforward question. The idea here, of course, should be that cities in that situation are already very much advantaged. You already have so much data. I think the focus should move away from collecting more data but perhaps maximizing in terms of analysis and analysis of what you already have. I think that can then, help you very strategically to understand better what is already happening within your cities, rather than, of course, going through another milestone of collecting additional data. I think the other angle that cities can also look at is to, if you already have, so for example, so many indicators, you could also prioritize just pulling out the small set of maybe high impact indicators that perhaps connect directly to the policies or the aspects of the quality of life that you're looking for, and perhaps those that also allow you to understand better in terms of the data disaggregations, either at the neighborhood or at any other levels. I think that way you might be able to make the best use of the massive data that you have in place. Over.
Okay,
Thank you very
thank you,
much.
Robert.
Valeria.
There's one more question. I don't know, it's posed to Noura. How does your proposed model for improving quality of life address long-term social equity and access rather than only short-term physical or economic indicators, especially for vulnerable and low-income communities? Do you want to give it a stab, Noura, or go ahead?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to jump in. And then I think, anyone on the technical side can also come in. I think, inclusivity was a core value that has been built into the DNA of the initiative. Now, again, is it going to be 100% on point all the time? No. Are we aiming for 80% at least? Yes. And how are we doing that, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right, the index includes kind of subjective and objective metrics. So, looking at when you look at social cohesion or social inclusivity, and making sure that all segments of, let's say, the population or residents are included, the process and the framework takes that into consideration. Social inclusivity and participation is a key aspect of this initiative, right? As I mentioned also earlier, this is not someone sitting in an office someplace trying to measure you or measure a city. It's about the city having a participatory process and making sure that they have an eye on all segments of society within their city. And is their index representative of their local context and demographics, and making sure that those checks and balances are in place. And so, just at a high level, that's kind of how we approach it in Saudi cities. I think that's how it's being approached in other cities. I think Zakaria could chime in, or even David from Manchester. I see Sukaina nodding her head. But again, it's participation and governance are really important for that to succeed. So I will leave it with that.
Thank you, Noura. I think we're running a bit short on time. We're over time indeed. So I'll hand back over to Eduardo for the closing remarks.
Thank you. We have the time really pressing, and I can see some people may drop because of that. I would like just to recall that this side event is done as part of the 56th Statistical Commission, and that is going to take place at the end of March. And I would like to invite all of you to join forces on this, to be part of a global community of practice of quality of life, not only in the statistical side, but also in the implementation, to be part of a network with national statistic offices, with cities applying the index, with regional commission and national governments, and of course, academic and technical partners. We want to use this network as enable peer learning, to accelerate methodological refinement, and to share experiences of AI, geospatial, use of technology, and of course, very important, to support low capacity context in this. We want quality of life to be a living system of practice, not a static framework, and to be transformed into a real public good. And for that, we count with your support for the forthcoming Statistical Commission meeting. Thank you very much to all of you for your participation.
Thank you, Eduardo. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.